Congressman Adam Schiff of California, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, joins me now. Schiff and his Democratic colleagues sent letters requesting information on Whitaker's involvement with that company's advisory board. And let's start there, Congressman Schiff. What are you asking for? What are your concerns about Whitaker?
Well, our concerns are that at a time when he was a paid advisory board member, this company is alleged to have been engaged in criminal conduct. We're talking about the chief law enforcement officer of the country. If he was aware of this criminal conduct or was implicated in any way or failed to uphold his responsibility, that is something that we ought to know of the chief law enforcement officer of the country. And certainly it raises another recusal issue. There's no way that he can or should be involved in any of the of that case, given that he has such a close tie to those involved.
Is it your understanding, that's been publicly reporting, but is it your understanding as well the FBI has an open criminal investigation into the activities of that very company?
I don't know the answer to that. That's not information generally that they share with the Congress.
Let me ask you this. Maryland has filed a motion basically asking a court to declare Rod Rosenstein the real attorney general, basically saying Whitaker's appointment is unconstitutional. Do you agree with that argument, or what remedies or courses of action do you want to see happen here?
I do agree with that lawsuit, and I think that his appointment does violate not only the Constitution, but other statutes as well. He is a principal officer. He's the top law enforcement officer in the country. The fact that he is serving it for a temporary period doesn't make him somehow inferior. We look at both the letter of the Constitution, which requires that that position be Senate confirmed, but we also look at the functionality. That is, if you interpret it the way the Justice Department is, what does that say about the function of that office by somebody who's an acting attorney general as compared to someone who's a permanent attorney general? And by that test, there's no difference in the function. He has no greater, no lesser responsibilities than if he were the permanent attorney general. They're identical. So it makes no sense to treat them differently. And finally, I think this is very persuasive, was also pointed out by the Maryland Attorney General, and that is, we have a succession statute specifically for the Department of Justice. In other cases, with other agencies that have a succession statute, they specify when you can also use the Vacancy Reform Act. This statute does not do that, and the strong implication is when Congress passed this statute and said this is the succession, it meant what it said, and when you have a conflict between a specific statute and a more general one, it's the specific statute that governs.
So there's a situation right now. The office is doing its work. It now reports up to, as far as we know, Mr. Whitaker, the acting attorney general. There's a question about what is happening in those interactions. What can you and the Democratic Party do once you gain control of the gavel to find out what's happening and ensure that there's no untoward interference?
Well, the first thing we can do is bring Mr. Whitaker before the Congress, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And we can demand answers in terms of what actions he's taking in the investigation, what communications he's had with the president, whether he sought an ethics opinion, what that ethics opinion told him to do, whether he is violating the terms of the ethics opinion. Now, I would fully expect that on some of these questions, the White House is likely to fight us. But nonetheless, we are going to persevere, and the truth is going to come out. There's just no way to avoid exposure if Mr. Whitaker does anything unethical. And we ought to expect everyone in the Justice Department to abide by the highest ethical standards, and that it includes particularly the Attorney General.
There's been some theorizing. Benjamin Witter wrote a piece to this extent the other day, and I've seen other people make the case that essentially the Mueller investigation is far enough along that it will find what it will find, and at this point there's not that much even a malevolent acting attorney general could do to stifle it. Is that your view?
No, it is not my view at all. That presupposes really all the work has been done in the investigation or farmed out to other people who can carry it on. No, let's remember that he can not only in this position interfere with what Bob Mueller is doing, he can interfere in what the Southern District of New York is doing. And to the degree that Bob Mueller has more work to do, let's say that the Mueller team has decided it needs to subpoena the president to force him to testify, that's something that can be prevented. And that may very well be the best evidence, an interview with the president on the issue of justice. So there's a great deal that he can do to harm the investigation. We in Congress are going to do everything we can, not only to protect the investigation, but to assist where we can. And, you know, in light of what you were discussing earlier, one of the things that we ought to do immediately is provide the transcripts of these witness interviews to Bob Mueller, because in light of the disclosures within the last 24 hours of these text messages that Mr. Stone apparently had provided to NBC News, both the existence of these text messages and their content raise a very substantial question about Mr. Stone's truthfulness under oath before our committee, and that evidence should be provided to the special counsel.
I should note in the other House of Congress and the Senate today, Jeff Coons and Senator Coons and Senator Flake attempt to bring to the floor a Protect Mueller bill that's already been written and co-sponsored, and they were objected to by Leader McConnell, so that's not going to happen. We'll see how that goes. Congressman Adam